August 18, 2005. A deep cave near Brigham Young University in the state of Utah. A group of 4 adventure seekers is making their way toward the exit late at night, but the tunnel leading to the exit is filled with water. Its length is only 4 meters, but these people aren't scared. They're young, full of enthusiasm, and well familiar with this place. Considering all that, swimming through the tunnel seems like a fairly simple task for them. But unfortunately, they won't make it out alive. This is the YM Archive channel. Give it a like, it's important, and we're starting. In 2005, 21-year-old Jennifer Galbraith had just finished her first year at Utah Valley State College, where she was studying philosophy. As the youngest of 4 siblings, she was always full of dreams and loved adventures. Her first year of studies was truly eventful and wonderful. She did photography, played bass guitar, and even participated in several modeling shows. Following her passions, Jennifer met a kindred spirit, a vocalist in the hardcore rock band Parallax and an extraordinarily talented artist named John Black Donner. 20-year-old John was from Provo and was in his 3rd year. He was also studying philosophy. Jennifer and John liked each other almost immediately. They started dating, and she joined his band Parallax. She also became friends with many other band members. However, their story would later be connected specifically with 3 more people: 28-year-old Kieran Scott, 18-year-old Ariel Singer, and 20-year-old Joseph Ferguson. All of them were band members. Besides music, they were bound by one more thing. They loved exploring unfamiliar places and were into hiking. So, at the beginning of 2005, Jennifer went into several caves in the surrounding areas to engage in spelunking. If anyone doesn't know what spelunking is, it's a type of adventure tourism that involves traveling through natural underground caves and overcoming various obstacles in them. Siphons, wells, with the use of various special equipment, scuba gear, carabiners, ropes, harnesses, and so on. In pictures, it looks like this, like that, and even like this. The paradise for claustrophobics from TikTok. That's it too. However, these trips weren't ideal. Sometimes Jennifer lost consciousness in the cave. Once she got lost. And here's the night of August 17, 2005. The group played a concert in a cafe, which went quite successfully. After that, Jack shared some interesting news with the group. In 2 days, he was going to write a review of their first album, which had finally been mixed. On the way home, they decided to stop for dinner. And that's when Jennifer threw a bold idea at her friends. She told them that during one of her previous expeditions, she had found an abandoned mine on Mount Y, located east of Brigham Young University. This mountain was known for the giant letter Y made by students in honor of the university, so it was quite popular among residents of the entire state. Although it wasn't a hotspot for cave tourists, it still wasn't a place for relaxed walks. To get to the goal, you had to overcome several obstacles. Entering the cave itself, you need to go through a tunnel that's half filled with water. Then, the entrance to another tunnel that's completely filled with water, and that entrance was a little more than a meter wide. That is, the caver had to dive and squeeze through. In that room, between the water and the sloping ceiling, you could catch your breath a bit. This space wasn't very large, it could fit up to 8 people, and they called it the Galuma Cave. At first glance, this whole adventure didn't seem extremely dangerous. Yes, swimming underwater, but only 4 meters, and then you can calmly catch your breath and return. That's what our heroes thought. But there was one catch. That very entrance to the underwater tunnel was quite small, about the width of a refrigerator door. This meant that only one person could swim into Galuma Cave at a time. And don't forget that the water came from an underground source, so it was simply icy. Plus, this water was terribly murky from debris. Even with a headlamp, visibility was practically zero. Accordingly, this led to a huge risk of disorientation and losing the exit underwater. And if someone accidentally stirred up the bottom of the tunnel, a thick layer of mud would instantly rise in the water like a dark, impenetrable cloud, swallowing up any remnants of the already poor visibility. This cave was popular, and before the kids arrived, there had already been tourists who, knowing about the dangers and problems of the tunnel, had strung a rope through it, securing it at both ends. By holding onto this rope, explorers could orient themselves in the murky water. However, when Jennifer had been here before, it didn't help her much. During her last visit, She got hypothermic and barely lost consciousness before the group managed to pull her to a safe place. However, this didn't scare the girl and she wanted to return there again, but now with her friends from the band. Over the dinner table, Jennifer convinced her friends to join her and check out the caves she was raving about. The other band members, just as adventure-loving as she was, eagerly accepted the invitation. During the conversation, they jokingly called this place the Cave of Death. They didn't yet know how bad a joke that was. And so, the evening of Wednesday, August 17th, smoothly transitions into the night of the 18th. Filled with excitement and anticipation, the group members, 5 in total, arrived at the entrance to the mine. It was around 3 a.m., and after spending an hour and a half exploring the area, at 4:30 they decide to start the descent. But then one of the friends, Joseph Ferguson, started saying he had an extremely bad premonition. Despite all the friends' attempts to support and calm the guy down, Joseph couldn't shake off the anxiety, so he decided to stay and wait at the tunnel entrance until they returned. He had no idea that this decision would turn out to be the best in his life. Jennifer and the team, crouching, made their way into the cave, lighting their path with flashlights. They began duck walking through a shallow stream, navigating turns until they reached a mark of 27 meters. There, they encountered a hole in the cave floor that led to that very scary tunnel with water and one guide rope. As we discussed earlier, the passage was so narrow that they had to submerge into the water one by one. Jennifer, already familiar with this cave and probably the most geared up for adventure, took the initiative. Grabbing the rope, she dove first into the murky water, and the others watched as she disappeared underwater. One by one, the other group members followed her, diving into the icy water and holding onto the rope. In the end, all of them ended up in that room, which would soon truly become their own cave of death. When they surfaced in the icy water, it dawned on them. They should have brought wetsuits to deal with the cold. But at that moment, nothing could be changed. The guys didn't attach much importance to it. After all, they weren't planning to stay there long. It was all planned as just another spontaneous adventure. Nothing more. They came in sandals and shorts, but just a few moments after they surfaced, there was a change in the air inside the cave. The space above their heads was barely 1 meter due to the constant presence of water. There was absolutely no air circulation here. Moreover, years of visits to this cave had depleted the oxygen supplies, replacing it with carbon dioxide. Add to that the fact that the limestone walls naturally produced carbon dioxide over time, and someone from a previous expedition had even left burning candles in the cave, which sucked up even more oxygen. The air in this cave had turned into a deadly trap. The group could hardly last more than a few minutes if they continued breathing the toxic air. As soon as they realized the full horror of the situation, panic seized them, and the 4 of them decided to turn back immediately. But since the narrow passage was ahead, only one could squeeze through it, and the others had to wait several agonizing minutes while the one swimming ahead reached the other side. Otherwise, if 2 people collided in the murky water midway, there was a real danger that the tunnel would simply get blocked, and both would drown. The situation was horrific. These people had just surfaced after the swim. They had just been holding their breath. They had already waded 27 meters through water and mud. They were already short of air, and the oppressive atmosphere of the cave only intensified it. While she was passing through, and the passage would be free again. But in their panic state, waiting was simply impossible. 18-year-old Ariel, gasping and panicking, dove into the water just a few moments after Jennifer, hoping her friend had already surfaced. She had no idea what had happened underwater. As soon as Jennifer was in the icy water, she desperately kicked her legs, trying to squeeze through the icy tunnel, with a critical shortage of air in her lungs. Her sharp movements stirred up all the mud from the cave bottom, turning the already murky water into a muddy mess. Gasping and disoriented, she lost her grip. She let go of the guide rope and lost consciousness without reaching the exit opening. This blockage caused a similar event. At the moment when she tried to find the exit, she collided with her friend's body, which completely blocked her path to the exit. Despite attempts to squeeze through, the narrow, water-filled cave trapped her too. She also lost consciousness. In another situation, a person might have lasted a bit longer and probably even tried to swim back. But with empty lungs and such murky water, there was simply no chance of returning. The whole tragedy unfolded in a matter of minutes, too fast for anyone to react. Meanwhile, the two guys left in the cave had no idea what had happened to their girlfriends just a few meters away from them. Assuming the girls had already gotten out, John decided to dive into the water. But the path in the tunnel, only 4 meters long, was now blocked by two lifeless bodies in front of him. Unable to move further and lacking sufficient oxygen, John also lost consciousness, and following him was the last group member, Scott McDonald, who met the same fate. About 45 minutes after they all entered the cave, Ferguson, waiting outside, felt uneasy. He crouched and entered the cave after his friends to check if they were still there. He reached that very pool from which they should have emerged, but there were no signs of movement, no flashlights. Worried, he could have dived in to get his friends, and the same tragic fate might have awaited him. But fortunately, he made the right choice again. When the rescuers arrived, more than 2 hours had passed since the group's submersion. The rescuers assumed the best-case scenario and hoped the kids were still alive and just stuck in the cave. So they began pumping oxygen into the cave, hoping to help any survivors. When there was no response, they started pumping out the water to safely enter the tunnel, and this process took another 4 hours. When the water level was lowered, the rescuers entered the cave fully equipped with protective gear. Unfortunately, they found the drowned bodies of all 4 group members. All of them, one after another, were facing in one direction, toward the exit. This was confirmed, and their bodies ultimately blocked the tunnel. Later that same day, the rescuers sealed the cave entrance with rocks and concrete, closing it forever. A memorial plaque was installed at the site. Perhaps this is an eternal tribute to those who paid the highest price for their passion. All detailed photos collected in the public domain about this case can be found in my Telegram channel. The link is in the description. June 2nd, 1997, 3 p.m. A female lifeguard at Concord Water Park is in a state of full panic. At her post on one of the highest slides, she's furiously blowing her whistle and shouting at the top of her lungs, trying to stop the tragedy that's about to happen. Below, a crowd of onlookers has gathered, their eyes glued to the attraction called Bonsai, because more than 30 school kids have gathered on this slide at once. Impatient, noisy, ignoring all safety rules. One after another, they hurl themselves down the slippery slide, ignoring the rules about necessary distance. The lifeguard is screaming in desperation, wildly waving her arms, trying to stop the reckless crowd. But a moment later, all her efforts will go to waste, and the once lively atmosphere of the park will collapse into a dark, anxious pit, turning into a blood-soaked disaster. Jalobia was a very capable student in high school in Napa, California. She was an excellent student. Besides academic success, she was very active and constantly participated in her school's life. Her goal was California State University in Sacramento, where she planned to study psychology. But right before graduation, she and her classmates were eagerly awaiting a celebratory trip to the water park, organized especially for the graduates of popular water parks in the area, known for their wild attractions. In the days leading up to the trip, the school kids couldn't stop planning. They thought through every detail, wanting the trip to be unforgettable. In their school, it was almost a tradition for the graduating class to go on a joint trip before graduation, and of course, stories about such trips were retold like legends to the younger classes. The tradition was upheld year after year. MBI and her classmates finally got their turn to be graduates too. They wanted to do something crazy to be remembered as well, because throughout the graduation year, they only heard about the previous graduating class, who supposedly all climbed onto one slide in the park at once, completely filling it during the descent, and then all slid into the pool holding hands. As reckless as it sounded, for a group of high school seniors, it sounded like a great idea. And at the planning stage, some of them decided they needed to beat the previous record. The idea spread like wildfire, and soon the whole class was in on the plan to pull off the risky stunt. Days passed, excitement grew, and finally, June 2nd, 1997, arrived. The students arrived at the water park early in the morning and got off the buses buzzing with anticipation. They looked at the dozens of slides and couldn't wait for their moment of glory. After a brief safety briefing, they scattered in different directions, inspired and ready to tackle the park. By midday, they had already tried the most popular slides, competed with each other in the wave pool, floated down the lazy river to catch their breath. Some teamed up in groups to go on the scariest attractions, while others chilled out. And the energy only grew. The teenagers checked off almost all the attractions on their list, pushing each other to higher and faster, wilder slides. This day was already carefree and full of adventures. And now it was time to take it to the next level. Around 3 p.m., everyone gathered around the bonsai slide. This slide, over 12 meters high, towered over the entire park. The long and winding path looked stunning. From the top, the whole water park was like the palm of your hand, and it took your breath away. More than 30 graduates climbed the stairs to the very top and were already ready for the descent. They started sliding down one by one, but soon everything went off plan. Normally, on such a high slide, there's a rule. After each person, you need to wait a couple of minutes until they cover enough distance and a safe gap is maintained. And although these school kids were explained all the rules, they deliberately ignored them. After all, they had a prearranged plan they were going to execute. They decided to slide down all together at once, 30 people. They laughed and shouted, not even suspecting what consequences this would lead to. The group of teenagers slid down one after another without any pauses. The first ones moved a bit forward and braced themselves against the sides with hands and feet, waiting for the next ones to enter. More and more people entered, but no one was moving. In this way, about 30 people gathered on the slide in a chain. They blocked the slide. In this fun madness was Kimby, whom we talked about earlier, just as excited and joyful as her classmates, completely unaware of what they had already done. Meanwhile, the female lifeguard was already in panic and trying to influence the situation with all her might. At first, she tried to stop the disobedient school kids, shouted and even physically blocked their way, but she was one against a crowd, and nothing worked. Plus, everything happened so fast that all she could do was blow the whistle and shout, hoping to attract her colleagues' attention or bring the kids to their senses. But nothing helped. By the time the last graduate entered, there were already so many people inside that he stopped a meter from the entrance and could reach it with his hand. At that moment, the slide was overloaded 4 times over. Yes, the structure was very reliable, designed for heavy weight, much more than the average person's weight, but 30 people at once was too much. In front of the idle onlookers below, who had gathered to watch what was happening, the slide began to slowly sag in the middle. The students in that part of the slide started noticing the danger and instantly gave in to panic. The space was pierced by screams from dozens of frightened school kids. They desperately tried to climb back to the platform, but it was already too late. It was a trap. 30 people inside the slide, one after another from the very entrance. They had nowhere to run. In a few seconds, it was obvious to everyone that the slide couldn't hold. But there was absolutely no time to take measures, call rescuers, and so on. The horror was happening here and now, and everyone around could only watch, powerless to help the kids inside the slide. And then, at a height of 11 meters, the slide's surface cracked, and everyone inside flew down straight onto the asphalt. Even those who were a few meters from the platform couldn't climb back. They fell one after another with horrifying sounds of screams and bodies hitting the ground. Some lost consciousness instantly, others screamed from pain and horror, and some just lay motionless. The worst part was that the students fell on top of each other, thereby increasing the injuries. Everything around was water mixed with blood. Everyone nearby ran to help in horror and, of course, called doctors. One of the lifeguards named Frank found a young girl, that same Kimby. She was all covered in blood and dirt. Out of the 33 students, she suffered the most. She had a broken ribcage and had hit her head hard on the wooden supports of the slide during the fall. At first, she was conscious, but despite all Frank's efforts, she soon lost it right on the way to the hospital. She died about 45 minutes after the fall. The other students were taken to 9 different hospitals, where they were treated for severe injuries for several weeks. Immediately after the incident, the park was closed and an investigation began. The parents of the injured teenagers, including MBI's family, filed a lawsuit claiming that the slide was poorly constructed and the park's security couldn't prevent the tragedy. They also accused the school administration of negligence toward the students, although everyone knew about the annual tradition and that this particular class had planned something. Just a few days later, the final investigation report came out, stating that the park hadn't violated any rules. The slide met all safety standards, and several students confirmed that the park worker had repeatedly warned the kids not to do it, but they were too excited to listen and ignored all prohibitions. Nevertheless, the company owning the park paid out about $4 million in compensation, $1.7 million of which went to the relatives of the deceased MBI. A memorial service for Kim was held a week later, where 800 students gathered to say goodbye to her, and her classmates were all still in bandages and casts, probably thinking about what would have happened if they had just enjoyed life instead of trying to set a new stupid record among graduates. Give it a like and subscribe to the channel, it's important. You can also watch another video that you see on the screen. See you soon.